Hi everyone, I'm Reena Jana, and I lead content and partnerships for responsible innovation at Google. Every day I get to advise teams and work with an amazing central team that offers resources and guidance to bringing critical thinking around ethical decision making into research and development for advanced technologies across the company. And every day, I bring my own experience as a product owner in the past, as a tech journalist in the past, as well as my humanities background focused on South Asia to this work and get to work with remarkable people across the company as well as external partners. And today I'm super excited to bring you behind the scenes on how we put responsible innovation into practice. I'm going to introduce you to amazing colleagues who are directors at Google who really drive that responsible AI lens throughout research, throughout product development, and into products that touch the lives of billions of people around the world. So without any delay, I'd like to introduce you to these three leaders. And I'm going to introduce you to them in a way that shows you how we work together. I'm going to start off by introducing you to Jen Janae, who's a director of responsible innovation and who founded the responsible innovation team at Google and is one of the co-authors of our AI principles themselves. Jen, if you could pass it on to Christine Robson, who's a leader in machine learning research, a director in research who also sits on our AI principles ethics committee. We look at decisions that influence products across the company, as well as research and on new AI applications. And then we'll introduce you to Archana Kannan, who is a product leader, a director in Google Shopping within Google Commerce. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen. If you could introduce yourself, tell us how you got into this space, and give us a little bit of an overview of your daily work.
Thank you very much, Reena. Hey all, I'm Jen Janae. As Reena mentioned, I'm the founder and director of Responsible Innovation here at Google. My pronouns are she and her. My team, Responsible Innovation, as Reena mentioned, work with products and researchers every day to ensure that Google lives up to its AI principles. We'll talk about the AI principles a bit more in detail later, but in summary, they're essentially our ethical charter, the constitution which designs how we develop and deploy AI responsibly across the company. I've led this team for almost 3 years at this stage, and before that, I led the ethical ML team in our trust and safety organization, which was born out of my work around user research and user safety for years, where I was able to identify that some people experienced our products differently because of how they identify. And so it led to a lot of work around machine learning fairness and understanding how do we make sure our products work better for everyone. I also got into this space because of my lived experiences as a woman in technology, an Irish immigrant in the United States, as well as my ongoing work on DEI initiatives across Google. So as I mentioned, day to day, we work with products and researchers to ensure that we meet our AI principles. This ethical charter ensures that we equip and empower people to think more critically about the impact of their products on the world. But we don't do this alone. We work with many different experts across the company, as well as engaging experts externally to inform our efforts here, to ensure that we're critically analyzing that impact of our products on the world. Some of those experts we'll hear from today, and with that, I'll pass over to Christine, one of the participants in our AI Principles review process, as well as a product manager in the research world. Over to you, Christine.
Thanks, Jen. And thanks everyone for being here today. My name's Christine. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a product manager in the research division, which is a bit of an unusual role for product. I have a background in research. I did a lot of work before I came to Google and IBM Research and Berkeley and MIT. I was a super nerd, basically. And I never imagined that I would end up in product management when I was starting out my career, but it's turned out to be just an amazing journey for me being here and getting to work on this area of technology that I care about very passionately, and in particular thinking about how the technology that we build with AI can apply to real user experiences for everyone in the world. And I'm very passionate about inclusivity and ensuring that AI is reaching everyone in a positive and uplifting manner. Just a little background, since I know we have a lot of folks at this conference, which I love, thinking about product and how you come here. I'll just say, I alluded to this earlier, it's not necessarily a question of knowing that you want to be in product and coming there and then fitting the bill. all of the product managers I work with and all of them on my team, we all come from very different reasons why we care about putting the user first and building products which really touch the world in a positive way. And I think that's really a unifying factor to think about. Even though my background is, it's very mathy, it's very nerdy, I always wanted to think about how we could build better algorithms and do better AI work. Now coming forward, I really care about how the way in which we use these technologies actually reaches the people. And that's the biggest reason that I came to Google coming up on 9 years ago now, was because I really saw the potential to reach a really broad audience. And that really drew me to Google to think about product in that, really holistic way. So anyway, it's been a wonderful time at Google, and I've been very privileged to work with with Jen and Archana and Reena, this whole crew of amazing product leaders, and in particular to work on looking at responsible innovation, looking at how we use our AI systems in a responsible way, and partnering closely these last several years to look at the research and try and get ahead of the research that we're just thinking about in its nascent stages, and where we think that might go and where we think that might touch product, and trying to think about that early enough and fairly enough that we can actually touch on these societal issues at the very beginning of our work. That's been a huge focus for me and my team, and for research in general. And so I'm really thrilled to have had this partnership, in particular with Jen's team, as we're on this journey. With that, I'll pass it over to Archana, who we partner on how we actually deploy this in products with.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Archana Kannan, and I lead product for Google Shopping and AR experiences. My journey, you can see a lot of similarities with some folks here, though I would say it's not the only one in product. But I did start out with a passion for like computer science and math, and I was an engineer at Google. I also did my MBA through the course of time, and then decided that hey, post my MBA, I wanted to get into product management, because as important as it is it to solve a problem, it's also important to realize like what is the problem to solve, why are we solving this problem, and I felt that the role in product would give me a lot of leverage to actually like tackle that question. Through the years, I've worked on like multiple products at Google. I worked on search, I've worked on shopping, I've worked in AR, and also like thinking like the future of like how do we bring much more helpful user experiences to all users around the world. When I take a step back, the tech industry never ceases to amaze me. In the last 20, 25 years, all the things that we have done, democratized access to information, brought in tons of new businesses online and helped them like reach consumers whom they couldn't have reached otherwise. Also like thinking about like creating global platforms like YouTube that helps like people bring their voice to a much global audience and like talk about things that are happening in the world around them, talk about like expressing their creativity. The reach is tremendous. And as my 5-year-old says and quotes his favorite superhero, with great powers come great responsibilities. And I cannot emphasize how important it is for us as people who are building this technology, who are helping users and businesses and like our ecosystem all around the world, on how important it is to think about what we are building. How are we building it? What is the responsibility that we owe to our users, to the society at large? And what can we be doing to push ourselves and the world beyond us? It's been wonderful partnering. I think Google taking a thoughtful approach to responsible AI, thinking about like innovation in a responsible way, in a fair way, and in an equitable way, and working with partners like Jen, partners like Christine, who are also like approaching it from like just a research aspect and thinking about like, hey, as we like, how do we bake this as a first principle into our products? It's been a wonderful partnership to like work with them and like bring these products to our users all around the world.
Thank you so much for those introductions and a little bit of a preview into the AI principles. Maybe we could pull those slides up. We could go through those in some detail together as we discuss them. And the first question that might be top of mind for everyone in the audience today is, we all have very different backgrounds, from engineering to journalism, trust and safety. also global backgrounds, coming from different nations, coming from different parts of the company. And what binds us together is sort of, maybe you heard that in our voices, is this North Star of the AI principles, this ethical charter that is common ground, across all of our work. So maybe we could talk about that. What is so important to have that? Why is it so important to have that North Star, that common language, these specific principles that apply across so many product areas and countries, communities, different types of people? So Jen, do you want to kick it off and maybe talk a little bit about the origins of the principles?
Yeah, so the origins of the principles were, as Reena said, this recognition that as we're building these advanced technologies, we need an ethical charter to ensure that we're building those technologies ethically and equitably. That back in 2017, when our CEO Sundar had announced that Google would be an AI first company, at the same time, we started thinking about how do we ensure that we'll be a responsible AI first company and ensuring that we're building for everyone and that we're not just taking it for granted that good outcomes will just happen. So our ethical charter and writing the AI principles start around 2017. It took about a year to work with internal and external experts to conduct research on what do our users expect of our products, how would that align with our existing company values and expectations, but also how to future-proof these principles to ensure that we're getting ahead of things that we currently don't have an insight into, we haven't built yet, but ensuring that we are setting ourselves up for that more ethical, equitable outcomes in the future. So working with, as I mentioned, internal experts, a lot of research, we started drafting these set of principles that aim to provide an aspirational goal for what our technology will provide. And so at the same time of thinking about aspirationally what we want to achieve, we also thought about what do we not want to facilitate? How do we ensure that we're preventing against any potential harms or negative outcomes? So the next slide shows the other angle, our guardrails on our AI principles. We have the previous 7 were aspirational things we're going to ensure we're achieving this social benefit, not just in the short term, but also in the long run. But these guardrails are then applications we will not pursue. How do we ensure that we're not just intending to have good outcomes, but we're actively working to prevent negative outcomes and having that positive impact on the world? So this also involved a lot of discussion around what aligns with our values, how do we codify our values into the AI principles. And as you'll see, they're quite high level. We do consider them essentially our constitution. It's a path of what we want to achieve, but it's really what we do day to day and how do we operationalize these principles that we'll be sharing a bit more detail in a moment.
Yeah, Christine or Archana, do you want to talk a little bit about how you bring in this North Star maybe in discussions with your team as you make decisions with them or guide them to make decisions?
Yeah, I'd love to call out how valuable this has been for the research organization, especially as so much of our research has grown to be AI related research and how huge a focus that is for the company. Thinking I actually find the best thing about the AI principles to be the positive thinking about what we do want to do, because especially at the research stages, it's not usually about winnowing down things we're not going to do. It's usually about trying to figure out what we do want to try and really sparking innovations that we think are going to matter. And we've seen a huge proliferation of research projects, since we put these principles forth, looking at, how we can improve our tooling, how we can improve the understanding that we have of our models, how we can really push towards making sure that we can do testing and accountability in our models. And these are not easy problems. These are fundamentally hard problems. They have huge math challenges. They have huge engineering challenges. These are really open research challenges that need to be addressed. And having this North Star to really point out with our research has been so invaluable as we think about what we're actually trying to build to have a positive impact on society.
And to me and my teams, what we take upon this is a great guidance to have. It also reinforces one of the first foundational principles that we have at Google, which is like take a user first approach. Our users are all around the world. Our users come from different races, different countries, different backgrounds. So when we take that user first approach, naturally it breaks down to how can we be fair? How can we not have bias in our systems creep in and everything? And to me personally, another fundamental approach that I take over here is that I try not to make any of these as a launch criteria. They actually need to be more of a product requirement starting from the early days of development, thinking about it right from the ideation stages, thinking about how we conduct our user research. How do we then like map out like what features we need to build and then build it accordingly? One of the major pitfalls that I've seen in places, where typically products fail, and kind of like thinking about responsible innovation is literally like making that as like a checklist towards the very end after product development and then trying to shoehorn it into the idea of like, oh yeah, now I've like hit this checkbox. But then if you actually imbibe the principle from the very early days of product development, it becomes a lot easier. I actually wanted to also give an example of one of the recent things that we did in partnership with like Jen's team and Christine's team over here, which is our work around like beauty. With our consumer shopping experiences, as well as like with AR as a technology, one of the very early verticals where we saw a ton of success was like beauty and the ability for users to know, okay, how would it look when I wear this makeup on my face? Can I see it on my face? And how does that look on my face? But also, as we were like, just like trying to innovate in this space and like figure out, okay, hey, what are the applications that we could have over here? We found that what people often said is that it's not just about like how something looks on my face. When I'm like quickly browsing through stuff, I want to know how it looks like on someone like me. And oftentimes, traditionally, the beauty industry, if you look at it, caters to a certain skin type and like a certain gender. And people did not feel represented. They were like, I have to imagine what this particular shade of red would look like, or this, this mauve would look like on my skin tone. But with AR, one of the things that we were able to do is that actually take the technology and like render lipstick, eyeshadow, different types of makeup products on a variety of skin tones. Today, if you go to Google search and search for like MAC Powder Kiss lipstick, you would actually see a unit that will show up on the page that will help you shop. But that shows you like this product on like multiple types of models. You'll see different skin tones. You'll actually even see men wearing this product. And this is something where, like when we think about the whole subset of users and like literally leaving no one behind, it becomes quite easy for us to like just incorporate these principles and then cater to all different types of users. This is a great hallmark for product for us from Google, and our partners have also like commended our efforts in this space. From L'Oreal to Estee Lauder to everyone else, they were pretty happy to say that, hey, this is a very new and innovative application of this technology, and for you to think about your global audience and reach users across the world was one great way for us to like also be able to like put, like reach users with our products. So again, like, from a very early day, like just incorporating the fundamental principle of like, okay, let's try to reach our users. Let's be fair and equitable. Let's make it more accessible. And thinking about it from the early days of product development really helped us like nail this particular feature.
Archana, thank you so much for that example. I even recall some of the consultations that the team did with your team on this, and it's such a detailed example of bringing these principles to life in that product development process. Maybe we can go a little bit deeper in terms of putting the principles into practice. And, as you said, a checklist just does not do this work justice. These are big problems, as Christine mentioned, and requires a lot of critical thinking and building a lot of muscle in this space and understanding a variety of issues around ethics that can get complicated, especially when you have global audiences and very diverse audiences and product goals. So perhaps we could talk a little bit about that operation side of things. How do you scale? I'm sure a lot of the product managers in the audience want to understand how to apply this across their own organizations. Maybe we could dive into that.
Yeah, I'll get it started because, Reena, to your point there, I think really changing hearts and minds from the start is very important, giving people the ethical critical thinking skills. Like, what are just some key questions to ask? As Archana mentioned, throughout the life cycle, it's not just a one and done. These are questions to be asking: who is going to be affected? How are they going to be affected? Who's more likely to benefit here, and who may be excluded from this experience, may not have as much of a benefit? So a set of key questions that open up the conversation and don't require people to be philosophers or trained in certain areas of social sciences to answer these questions, but they're building on those expertise and they're bringing in those experts into the conversation. So being able to both leverage and build on expertise while holding yourself accountable to be asking the right questions. And I think that's what's been really useful for us, is having these interdisciplinary conversations around raising different questions, raising potential issues, talking about the tools and infrastructure that could help address or mitigate against those issues, as well as establishing some metrics that allow us to check for potential issues of bias or potential changes and differences in how people experience it. So at least for us, and to share with others, as Christine mentioned, this is not easy. We're not all just assumed to be experts in these areas, and it's okay to acknowledge that and build on top of it by asking these questions around who is affected, what's the best thing that could happen with my product, but also what's the worst thing that could happen. So how do we amplify the benefits while deliberately working to mitigate or prevent the negative outcomes? So really for us, starting with that, empower and equip people with the right questions, as well as developing tools and infrastructure to address some of these issues. And then it's a constant kind of check. One of our functions is to test products from this kind of adversarial perspective of common failure modes. If we know that a particular product is more likely to be affected potentially by skin tone issues, then ensuring that we're both working with experts in that space as well as testing for potential negative outcomes. So there are a few ways to both acknowledge that this is highly complex, and also that we can start filling in some of those gaps by making it an ongoing process of analysis, testing, and responsible development as we go along.
You know, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add one thing to that I really appreciate partnering with Jen's team on so much, which is really just around education and awareness. I feel like there's been such a shift. You know, when I was first doing product in the space, the notion of using AI in product was still a little tentative. It seemed sort of science fiction-y. It didn't necessarily seem like it was going to have an immediate positive impact on users. And so, you know, I felt like I started my product career trying to educate people about machine learning. And then machine learning got very exciting and everybody wanted to learn about it. And so we started, you know, building courses and putting materials together where we could really teach people about how machine learning could apply in product. And, you know, threaded into that from the beginning was this notion of trying to make sure that it reaches all of your users, but actually having a systemic framework to think through what that means, and bringing, you know, not just, you know, as PMs, you think about how to bring your team along on this journey with you, right? Bringing not just the PMs, but also the engineering teams along and educating them in, you know, what it means to build inclusive products, and you know, who your users really are and how we reach our users where they are is so critical. And that's a partnership that's been so helpful for me working closely with Jen's team over the years, and that I think has made a huge difference at Google. And so I would encourage you, you know, as PMs who are looking to apply this in practice, you know, take that on yourself, understand what that means, and make sure that it's not just you, but your whole team that really understands the value and importance of inclusivity.
And I'll add my simple hack, but it goes very much in alignment with like what Jen was saying. Diversity of thought is going to be super important in kind of like holistically covering all aspects of AI principles. And for me personally, the easiest way to do that is to make sure that I hire diverse set of folks into my team. Having a diverse team and having that like thought come in and that open communication is going to be very important, where everybody normalizes different perspectives. And then you don't have to be an expert in a certain field, but you can actually like think like users from like different aspects and actually imbibe that into the products that you develop. So as we look to this conference, as and I look at all of you as like women product managers, I'm looking that you would all like, you know, think about like, hey, what could you be doing? How could you as a PM kind of like push the boundaries over here? And also do visit the Google booth at this point if you're interested in like, you know, helping us push the boundaries in this space.
Thank you so much. That's a really great example of you know, a strong leadership decision in this space. And maybe we could talk a little bit about what's special in this new area of product leadership. Responsible innovation, it's becoming a discipline. You know, you see consulting organizations come up with this practice. You're seeing other tech organizations come up with this practice as well. So it's becoming a field of leadership. and in many ways, you're pioneers in it. So, what can you offer to PMs present and future in our audience today in terms of building leadership skills in this responsible innovation space?
I'm smiling broadly because I think the kind of maybe typical adage of handling ambiguity and building resilience in this space. If someone says they have all the answers in this space, that can't be true. If people say that you can solve fairness and fix fairness, that's not true. We have to do all we can to try and reduce the exposure, mitigate as much as possible against these issues. But these are really hard human issues. These have affected humanity since we've been here, and to think that AI can fix these things alone is not true. That's why we have these interdisciplinary conversations in order to understand better and to close that gap as much as possible. So being able to kind of lean into that and say, well, you have to just be biased towards action, just every day making some improvements, not letting perfect be the enemy of good, and just making progress there. So I'd say lean into this challenge. It is an exciting space. It's massively important. And so bringing both your lived experience, but also your expertise in product management to help us all be better here, that we all need to come together to build these ethical, equitable outcomes into our product. So I'd say lean into it. It is a fascinating space and it's massively important. So we look to all of you to build these products that will have a positive and bigger impact on society.
I'd like to echo that with just the specific and tactical advice that, as a PM, you're going to be working closely with the team that's building the product. And it's very easy to myopically sort of assume that you know everything in the immediate sphere. It is your role as the product manager to reach out for those cross-functional partnerships, to get advice from people who think outside the box, and to bring that back into your team. There's no other place that really comes into product as clearly as in your role specifically. So I encourage you to really strengthen those partnerships outside of your immediate space, and really get those additional pieces of information in, those additional pieces of advice, and keep that open mind.
And I'll add on to that and say that it's important to always be listening and always be open. What the boundaries of like what is responsibility, what is fairness, what is equitability continues to be shaped on an everyday basis. What I thought was fairness like 10 years ago, I think my view and my own personal viewpoint has evolved quite a bit in the last 10 years. So it's important for us to be open and have that open mindset as product managers. And also, it's equally important to be listening to our users, listening to those underrepresented voices, and making sure that we build for everyone and not just for like one segment of users.
We've covered so much in this half hour, and I know the conversation is going to continue online and offline. If you had one final tip to offer everybody in the audience to go forward with, what would it be? And I can sort of kick it off with like, please put principles into practice. It's wonderful to have these principles. If we don't take action, they don't become real. And there are real tools that you can go to. We have a responsible AI toolkit that's available online. If you go to ai.google/principles, you can learn more about our principles and our approach. We're happy to share those. So just please put principles into practice. I'll pass it on to the speakers to offer that one last tip.
Mine would be practice your ethical thinking skills every day. It is about asking who's in the room, who's not in the room, who do I need to be talking to, what expertise can I bring in, but also thinking about you as your responsibility as a product manager. What's the best possible outcome of my product? What's the worst possible thing that could happen? And how am I taking deliberate steps to make sure that doesn't happen? That accountability on you, and claim it and work with, as Christine says, those experts to help you expand your knowledge, but also to ensure that you're moving forward productively.
I'd say my big takeaway is to remember that you have to meet your users where they are. It's not just about finding which users you can provide benefit for. It's about providing benefit for all of the users and really understanding where each of them are coming, especially when, we're working in tech, we work with disruptive technologies, we work in ways that don't affect our users individually, but also, their communities, society. really thinking about where your users are and having that user obsession where you really understand where they are and you're really thinking about how this is going to affect all of them is just so critical. And so that's what I would encourage you to do. Just have that broad user obsession.
There is so much headroom in this space. So today I'll ask all of you to figure out where your values are, ground your values, and you can literally start anywhere. You can start with the product you're building, you can start with the teams that you end up hiring, or even the culture that you want to represent to your team. So you could literally start anywhere. And I'm very confident that the future of product leaders is going to be people who can intuitively build responsibly. So start practicing and exercising that muscle on an everyday basis for all your users. And I'm sure that there is a lot that we could do together in this space.
Well, thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed this behind the scenes look at how we work on responsible innovation at Google. And as you can see, you play a really important role as product managers, and we look forward to learning from you too in the future. Thanks so much.
So today I will share my experience working at the intersection of social impact and machine learning. My name is Adesola, and I'm a product manager at Jigsaw, a unit within Google. As a Nigerian American, I am passionate about using technology to solve the world's greatest problems while being a champion for greater equality. This passion prompted my desire to join Jigsaw. Jigsaw is a team within Google that explores threats to open societies and builds technology that inspires scalable solutions. This means that all of our products are free and publicly available, and that we leverage technology to make people safer online through our work and research. I have the great honor of leading the anti-harassment efforts at Jigsaw. My team at Jigsaw focuses on combating online toxicity and harassment. As more voices join the conversation all around the world, unfortunately, online toxicity and harassment continues to plague digital spaces. Online harassment silences the voices of targets and the witnesses of the abuse, and it affects a significant portion of society and can lead to very harmful effects. Nearly 50% of Americans have personally experienced online harassment, and approximately 2/3 of Americans have witnessed harassment happening to someone else. I'm sure many of you have seen or even experienced harassment and know intimately how that impacts your experience online. It can make you feel unsafe, it can make you disengage or isolate altogether. And like many of you, I wondered what I could do to intervene and fight this social harm. So I'm super excited to share the work that I'm able to do at Jigsaw. Our goal in tackling this problem space is to enable more safe and inclusive engagement in good faith discussions online globally. So how are we doing this? We teamed up with Google's counter abuse team to launch Perspective API. Perspective API uses machine learning to identify toxic comments, making it easier to host better conversations online. Put simply, Perspective takes in comment text as input and then uses machine learning to output a toxicity score for that comment. Perspective is free and can analyze comments in English, Spanish, French, German, Portuguese, Italian, and Russian, with even more languages in development. Platforms then use this toxicity score to do a variety of things. Perspective can help moderators more easily review comments across different forums. It can give feedback to commenters to help them write more respectful content as they engage with others online. Perspective can also help readers more easily find interesting or productive comments to engage with. And finally, Perspective can also be used to help researchers assess and visualize trends in certain communities. So how does this translate to real-world impact? Over 200 partners across many verticals send us over 500 million queries a day. Our key partners range across media, gaming, and all sorts of platforms that facilitate conversation in online spaces. So let's jump into a case study to understand the impact that perspective can have. We teamed up with New York Times to provide ML-assisted moderation with perspective. And as a result, New York Times is able to triple the amount of articles open for user comments. Without ML, moderators would need to review every single comment, making it impossible to scale and provide different articles for engagement. The moderation tool pictured on this slide helps moderators narrow down on the most toxic comments that need attention immediately. So what is the role of a product manager working in this space? The first key element is that a PM in this space should lean on research-driven experimentation. When tackling complex issues with unconventional approaches, we must get comfortable failing fast and moving on to the next potential solution. When exploring new frontiers through research, it's important to stay agile and follow through with new opportunities. So at Jigsaw, we are very transparent with our work so that we can collaborate with other innovators in this space and drive experimentation to combat these problems. Next, it's super important to avoid creating or reinforcing unfair bias. We must set guidelines to mitigate bias and remain ethical in our practices to avoid inadvertently perpetuating prejudice. Initially, when we launched Perspective, we noticed bias caused by data set imbalance, which meant that frequently attacked identities were overrepresented in toxic comments, which could yield biased results. And so to address this issue, we added non-toxic data from Wikipedia and New York Times articles to fix this imbalance. You can see the before and after of our training set distribution on this slide. And we continue to do this work with ongoing research as feedback evolves, because it's super important to make sure that we're not reinforcing unfair bias. Next, we must be mindful of adverse outcomes or unintended consequences. In selecting our partners or giving them advice on how to use perspective, we make sure to communicate and document the intended use cases and use cases to avoid, so that organizations do not use our technology for nefarious purposes or in counterproductive ways. For example, we always tell partners that we do not recommend that perspective be used to replace humans entirely. ML models are never perfect and they can definitely make mistakes. So we recommend staying away from full automation and keeping a human in the loop to make sure that final decisions on what content gets taken down is done by a human. Another important principle is privacy. And for that reason, our models only look at the text of the comment and not who is making the comment. Perspective is not for character judgment or brand management, and we offer a perspective feature that ensures that no data is stored in sensitive use cases. And in this way, we are able to make sure that while we provide this amazing technology, we're mindful of the ways that it can be used for harm. And finally, as a PM in this space, you must broaden your definition of success. For my team, while we are able to track the amount of requests sent to Perspective, we're not able to accurately pinpoint how many people are touched by our technology. So we have to get creative as we strive to uncover the true people impact. For example, we often commission studies with specific partners to validate new features or use cases. When we wanted to understand the impact that real-time feedback could have on people as they were writing a comment, as pictured by the example on the slide, we partnered with Coral by Vox Media and Open Web to run a study to test this use case. Our study showed that a third of users who received feedback powered by Perspective API chose to edit their comment. And about half of those revised comments ended up meeting community guidelines and were then published. And so in this way, we were able to see success through a study that showed that our technology can be used to change the way people engage online and give them an opportunity to think about how they can make their comments more respectful. And so ultimately, I am proud to work at the intersection of social impact and machine learning. At Jigsaw, we've been able to make great strides to make digital spaces safer for so many people around the world. And as product leaders, I implore all of us to continue to think about ways that we can leverage technology for social good and create a world that we are all proud of. Thank you. So, when I think about the Women in Product theme of Ignite Possibility, it strongly ties to the Google theme of Building for Change. And so I'm super excited to introduce Neena to talk about her personal journey of change.
Thank you, Adesola, for that intriguing conversation. I'm Neena Budhiraja, and I'm here to share my story with you. It was 1 a.m. on January 26, 2017. I sat by the pool, coming to grips with the reality that my doctor had just shared with me, that my 23-week pregnancy was not going to make it to the end. I couldn't help but wonder, for all the things that I had been optimizing for in life, a stellar education, a prestigious recruitment, big titles, fancy cars, a beautiful house, an investment, a BMW, nothing could have saved my child's life. So why had I been prioritizing these things above all else? Later that evening, I lost my baby. And with it, my understanding, my perception of what a happy, fulfilling life should be. It took me weeks, months to get out of that state. Friends, family, colleagues all flocked to my side to help me deal with the grief and the pain. Jay, my unborn child, I am always going to miss you, but thank you for teaching me so much in those short 6 months. 5 years ago, I was optimizing for one dimension, me. I was stuck in the rat race. I ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner in front of my desk while my colleagues all hung out and bonded in local bars. I worked hard towards that next promotion and got frustrated if it didn't come fast enough. I rarely spent a few minutes catching up with my parents and my in laws because they were always going to be there, right? Oh, how naive I was. 5 years later, I stand here confidently saying that that one life event single-handedly shaped my perspective and made me who I am. I'm here today to share with you my journey from me to we. I aim to leave you all with a handy compass for finding your growth and purpose in life through the power of relationships. After losing Jay, I started realizing the power in relationships. It was relationships, after all, that had catapulted me out of the darkest period of my life. I might have been a tornado knocking down the naughtiest of problems, but honestly, I could do a lot better with my friends and colleagues by my side. I started making small changes. I started carving time out every weekend in order to touch base with my parents, my in laws, my closest friends. I started rekindling relationships with my business school classmates as well as ex colleagues. And I observed myself bringing these changes to work too. I realized that intra-team bonds formed outside the minimal confines of work actually helped improve team productivity and reduce friction. Disparate teams were more willing to work with each other when there was innate trust in relationships formed outside of work. They were willing to prioritize each other's priorities. The multiplier effect in relationships started startling me a little bit. For example, I could develop a strong product gut by observing my users. But if I made a video research report, then I could bring my entire team up to the same observations and able to innovate from there. Similarly, I could vie for and compete for and retain the strongest of talent. But if I opened doors for this talent to find better opportunities, they would grow faster. And you know what? The net worth of my network would multiply faster. This blew my mind. I pivoted from being an individual contributor to being a facilitator, a people person. The impact at my work was stark. My responsibilities started growing, but I was not overwhelmed because I had built strong teams. I started leading a business line, a P&L, all by focusing on one building block: people. I started carving time out to think through team morale, culture, as well as recruiting. For example, I set up a committee to protect employees from harassment at work, something we unfortunately had to look out for as an Indian startup. Over time, employees, new joinees started recruiting at the startup, particularly to join my teams, not because of the team culture alone, but also because of the opportunities that opened up for them once they joined. Fast forward a few years, COVID has only reinforced my belief in the power of relationships, even though it has made me question my desire to be a parent. In a world where we've barely been able to see each other, we have been able to keep our productivity up because of relationships formed through many, many team lunches, team bonding events. I still carve time out to think through recruiting and team culture. I still now make time for speaker engagements like this one so as to grow my network, to get to know young leaders like yourselves, to share my story, and to listen to yours. In conclusion, my journey from pain to purpose has been a long, arduous one I could only achieve on the back of many, many relationships. But it has been a journey from me to we. My team, my network, my companies have all been able to innovate and reach new heights, all while having rewarding experiences. I want to leave you with my story. I would love to encourage you all to see where each one of you is in this spectrum of me to we, and to nudge you all to experience the joys of achievements as we rather than the lonely conquests of me. These are the moments that matter with the people that matter. Make each one count. Lastly, I want to leave you all with my own personal fairy tale ending. I am now a mother of a healthy, happy 3-year-old, and I'm 20 weeks pregnant with my second child. Now, only if COVID would hurry up and leave so that I'm not overwhelmed again in a few months. Thank you. That's all for me.